Stormfront Publishing presents Shadows of Valor. Written by James Krieger and Adolf Riker. Performed by Thomas Richter. Chapter 3. The greatest victories are won not on the battlefield, but in the minds of men who choose their fate. Ancient Roman proverb. June 3rd, 1945. 14:30 local time. Displaced Persons Camp, 7, Bavaria. Patton stood before 43 ghosts. The Russian POWs sat on wooden benches in the converted warehouse, backs bent from 3 years of German hospitality. Afternoon light slanted through gaps in the corrugated metal walls, painting zebra stripes across men already wearing the vertical stripes of concentration camps. The fabric hung loose on skeletal frames. What had been made for healthy men now draped like funeral shrouds. The warehouse stank of industrial oil and human desperation. Machine grease from its previous life as a vehicle depot mixed with the sour smell of unwashed bodies, infected wounds, and the particular odor of men who'd learned to survive on sawdust bread and turnip soup. Patton's cigar smoke cut through it like a knife, American tobacco versus European suffering. Behind Patton, a squad from the 80th Infantry Division stood guard. Good men who'd fought from Normandy to here. M1 Garands held at port arms, their walnut stocks gleaming with gun oil. They'd seen what the Nazis did to Russian POWs, seen the mass graves outside Ohrdruf, bodies stacked like cordwood, the walking skeletons of Buchenwald. Private Garrett kept swallowing hard, his Adam's apple bobbing above his field scarf. The boy was 19 from Iowa, still believed the world made sense. Major Volkov translated, though Patton suspected the man understood more English than he let on. Former 5th Guards airborne. The shoulder boards might be gone, but the bearing remained. Broad shoulders that had once carried a parachute pack, now sharp bones poking through a donated American field jacket. The whole unit had dropped behind German lines in '42. None made it back. Stalin had written them off as dead, then cowards, then traitors. "Tell them I know who they are," Patton said. His cavalry boots clicked on the concrete floor as he paced, each step echoing in the vast space. Elite guards, trained killers. The best Moscow had. Volkov translated, his voice hoarse from whatever the Germans had done to his throat. A few men straightened on their benches. Pride died hard, even in camps. One, a sergeant by the faded insignia on his collar, had arms covered in crude tattoos, not decoration, camp numbers, unit identification etched with burnt matches and lamp soot. The Nazis had tried to erase them. They'd written their names in their own skin. "Tell them I also know what Order 270 means." The atmosphere changed like a door slamming shut. Order 270. Stalin's decree that surrender was treason, that captured soldiers were deserters, that their families were guilty by association. The warehouse seemed to grow colder, though the June sun still blazed outside. Behind Patton, Private Garrett's knuckles went white on his M1, the tendons standing out like bridge cables. The Garand's leather sling creaked under his grip. Sergeant Murphy shifted his Thompson, the 30-round magazine clicking against his web belt. These men had pulled POWs from German camps, fed them from their own rations, K-rations and chocolate bars stuffed into skeletal hands, watched them die free, crying their thanks in languages the GIs didn't understand. The idea that their own country would execute them for surviving. "Easy, boys," Master Sergeant Russell murmured. But his jaw was tight too, the muscle jumping beneath weathered skin. Russell had been at Malmedy, seen what the SS did to prisoners. This was supposed to be different. The good guys weren't supposed to murder their own. Volkov's translation came slower, each word dropping like a stone into still water. Several Russians looked at the floor, concrete stained with motor oil and older, darker things. One man's hands shook with palsy. Malnutrition, Patton recognized, the body eating itself. "The war's over. In 2 weeks, maybe 3. This camp transfers to Soviet control." Patton lit a fresh cigar with his Ronson lighter, the flame steady despite the tremor in the air. "Repatriation, they'll call it. Train ride home. Heroes welcome. He let that sink in. They knew better. They'd heard about the filtration camps through the wire telegraph, that mysterious communication network that existed in every camp. The NKVD interrogations, the executions against blood-spattered walls, Coloma if they were lucky, 10 years breaking rocks in weather that killed men faster than German bullets. Bastards, Garrett whispered. His voice cracked on the word. Murphy jabbed him with an elbow hard enough to bruise, but didn't disagree. The sergeant's family had fled Stalin before Hitler. He knew about cattle cars going east. Or, Patton blew smoke toward the corrugated ceiling where sparrows nested in the rafters. Their chirping seemed obscene in this place. You disappear. Tonight. New names, new lives, working for me. A scarred sergeant spoke. The scars were deliberate. SS Entertainment written on his face, cheeks carved with swastikas that had been turned into different symbols, pain transformed into defiance. Volkov translated, "Doing what?" "What you're trained for, what you're good at." Patton studied their faces, hollow cheeks casting shadows in the striped light, eyes that had seen too much but still calculated angles, distances, escape routes. These weren't broken men. Broken men didn't survive 3 years in camps. These were weapons, rusted but still sharp. The real war's coming, not with Germans, with the men who betrayed you. More Russian. Arguing. Hands moving in sharp gestures, military sign language adapted for conspiracy. Volkov summarized. They ask about their families. Your families think you're dead, have thought so for 3 years. Patton's voice was cold truth, each word precise as a surgical cut. They've mourned, moved on, been told you died as heroes of the Soviet Union. Your mothers have your medals, Order of the Red Star, Order of the Patriotic War. Your children know you gave everything for the motherland. Your names are on memorials. The GIs exchanged glances over their weapons. They'd all written letters home, V-mail on tissue-thin paper. Knew what those letters meant. Mom baking apple pie, Dad fixing the truck, girls waiting at the drugstore. The thought of families getting medals while their boys rotted in camps. Fucking animals, someone muttered. Russell didn't bother finding who. The sentiment was universal. You go back now, alive. Those medals become shame. Those stories become lies. Your families get visits from the NKVD. Patton let that image settle like poison in a well. Black cars at 3 a.m. Your wives denounced as wives of traitors. Your children banned from universities. Your parents' rations cut. All because you had the audacity to survive. A lieutenant with burn scars stood. The burns were chemical, phosphorus probably. They gave his face a melted wax quality that moved wrong when he spoke, but his voice was strong, trained on parade grounds in Leningrad or Moscow. Spoke at length, gesturing with hands missing several fingers. Frostbite or punishment, in the camps, both were common currency. Volkov translated carefully, his own voice gaining strength from the words. He says they fought for Russia, not Stalin. Says they bled for their country while commissars sat in Moscow eating caviar. Says they dropped into Wehrmacht positions while party bosses hid in the metro. Says Stalin betrayed them first when he signed orders calling them cowards for being captured while unconscious from wounds. Smart man. Patton nodded. The cigar had gone out. He didn't relight it. Here's my offer. You work for me. Train my people in Soviet tactics. Share what you know about Red Army doctrine. Teach them to think like Russians, fight like Russians. When the time comes, and it will come, you help us fight. Not against Russia, against the system that threw you away like broken tools. The burned lieutenant was translating now for those who didn't speak English. Patton caught words he recognized. America. Documenti. Smirt. Death. In exchange, you live. New identities. American protection. And your families keep their heroes, their pensions, their pride. Their children grow up believing their fathers died defending the motherland, not rotting in camps because some commissar needed to fill a quota. And if we refuse? The scarred sergeant asked through Volkov. His Russian was oddly accented, Ukrainian maybe, or from the Baltic republics, places where Stalin's name was already a curse. Then you're processed through normal channels, repatriated as per Allied agreements. Patton shrugged, his leather jacket creaking. Soviet liaison officers arrive next week, NKVD most likely, wearing Red Army uniforms. They'll have lists, questions. Your families learn you've been alive all this time. In German camps. Surrendered instead of dying. You know what happens next. Bitter laughter from the Russians. The sound was like breaking glass. Behind Patton, his men's faces were stone. Garrett had gone pale beneath his sunburn. They'd liberated these men. Fed them. Chocolate bars and Lucky Strikes and spam that was ambrosia after camp swill. Treated their wounds with sulfa powder and morphine syrettes. Carried those too weak to walk. Now they'd have to hand them over to die. The burned lieutenant spoke again. Others joined in. Heated debate in Russian, voices rising and falling like a violent tide. Hands chopped air. One man wept silently, tears cutting channels through dirt. Finally, the lieutenant turned to Patton. "We need guarantees," Volkov translated. "Written promises, protection, not just words that disappear like smoke." "You'll get them." Patton gestured to Boyer, who produced folders from a leather briefcase. The documents rustled like autumn leaves. "New identities starting tonight. Displaced Poles, Czechs, Hungarians, whatever works. Full documentation. Birth certificates, travel permits, even library cards from towns that don't exist anymore." Boyer spread the papers on a makeshift table, planks over sawhorses. The typewriter ink was still fresh enough to smell. Uncle Sam's own forgery department working overtime. "And we remain dead?" The question came from a young private, barely out of his teens despite his camp-aged face. "Dead as Lenin, dead as honor in the Kremlin." Patton met each man's eyes, brown, gray, green, all holding the same wolf-like wariness. "Your families keep their martyrs, their pride, their pensions. Your children tell their children about grandfather the hero. Songs are sung, tears are shed, but clean tears, proud tears, not the tears of families destroyed by association." More debate. The lieutenant traced patterns on the dusty floor with his boot. Tactical movements, maybe, or just nervous energy. Then he asked in broken English, "Why trust you?" "Because I'm offering you something Stalin won't. A choice." Patton dropped his cigar, ground it out with his heel. The tobacco smeared across concrete like a small sacrifice. "Die as traitors, or live as ghosts. Let your families suffer, or let them remember heroes. Be dragged home in chains, or walk free with new names. Simple mathematics." The lieutenant translated for the others. One by one, heads nodded. Defeated. Resigned. Practical. The mathematics of survival, computed by men who'd counted every grain of ersatz bread for 3 years. "We accept." The lieutenant's English was improving by the minute. Amazing what the survival instinct could accomplish. "We are dead men. Have been since 1942. But we choose how we serve in death." Others stood. Joints popped from malnutrition. One man swayed, caught himself. 43 men accepting erasure, choosing to remain myths rather than become shameful truths. Phantoms in American service rather than corpses in Soviet graves. Outstanding. Patton returned their salute. The old way, the military way, not the party way. "Welcome to the Ghost Army, gentlemen. Your families will never know, but you'll help save them from what's coming." As they filed out to receive new papers, their striped uniforms rustling like ghosts already, Private Garrett spoke up. "Sir, we really gonna let the Reds kill their own men like that? Men who fought honorable, who got captured unconscious or outnumbered or out of ammo?" Patton turned. Looked at his squad. American boys who still believed in fair play. Who'd grown up with the Geneva Convention and the idea that prisoners should be treated decent. Garrett's face was tight with the kind of anger that came from shattered illusions. "No, son. We're not letting them do a goddamn thing." He gestured at the departing Russians shuffling toward their rebirth. "We just saved 43 good soldiers. And they're going to help us save a hell of a lot more. The GIs relaxed slightly. This they understood. Soldiers helping soldiers, breaking rules to save lives, even if it meant forging documents and lying to allies, especially if it meant spitting in Stalin's eye. Outside, trucks rumbled to life, deuce and a halves that would carry the ghosts to processing centers. 43 Russian commandos climbing into American vehicles, leaving their names in that warehouse with the motor oil stains and sparrow nests. Each one worth a company of regular troops in the wars to come. Each one burning for revenge against the system that betrayed them. Each one choosing to stay dead so their families could live with pride instead of shame. The warehouse door slammed shut on their past lives. In the distance, thunder growled over the Bavarian Alps. Storm coming. The Cold War hadn't officially started yet, but Patton was already recruiting corpses for it. And the dead, as he'd learned, made the most motivated soldiers. Patton strode out of the warehouse into the afternoon glare. The June sun hit like a hammer after the shadows inside. His staff car, a captured Mercedes painted olive drab, sat idling beside the fence, engine purring with German precision. The driver snapped to attention, but Patton was already reaching for the rear door. Lieutenant Colonel Boyer sat in the back seat, manila folders spread across his lap like a card sharp's deck. The car's interior smelled of leather and Boyer's Chesterfields, windows cracked to let the smoke escape. As Patton slid in, Boyer gathered the dossiers, tapping them into order with nervous precision. "Drive," Patton ordered. The Mercedes pulled away smooth as silk, tires crunching on gravel. Through the rear window, the warehouse shrank, just another prefab structure in a camp full of them. "Well, Alec?" Boyer's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. 43 Russians, General. 43 former enemies who'll be working alongside. He gestured at the folders. The bulk of our German recruits. The Wehrmacht officers from Operation Paperclip. The Waffen-SS from the Eastern Front who suddenly discovered their anti-communist convictions. You think they won't play nice together? Not a question. Sir, 6 months ago these men were trying to kill each other. The Russians watched their friends die in German camps. The Germans spent 3 years fighting Soviets. Boyer pulled out a silver flask, took a pull, offered it to Patton. Good Kentucky bourbon, taste of home. Put them in the same unit, we'll have fratricide within a week. Patton took the flask. Didn't drink. Show me the alternatives. Boyer opened the first folder. A photograph clipped to the top. Young man in British commando uniform. Captain Nathaniel Cross, SAS. Dropped into Norway in '42, lived with the resistance for 2 years. Speaks 4 languages, expert in unconventional warfare. British. He's got dual citizenship. Mother was American. From Boston. Boyer flipped to the next folder. Master Sergeant Roy Tucker, 82nd Airborne. Made every combat jump from Sicily to the Rhine. Pathfinder qualified. Has a talent for languages and, Boyer lowered his voice, certain irregular skills he picked up before the war. Criminal? Safe cracker. Cat burglar. The FBI had a file on him thick as a phone book before Pearl Harbor. Judge gave him a choice, prison or the paratroopers. Patton snorted. Practical man. More folders. A Marine raider who'd spent 6 months behind Japanese lines living off the land. An OSS operative who'd run resistance networks in occupied France. A combat engineer who'd developed new explosive techniques in Italy, all Americans or close enough to count. Solid men, Patton acknowledged. The Mercedes hit a pothole. Even German engineering couldn't overcome war-torn roads. But they're soldiers, conventional fighters. Unlike the Russians? Boyer's tone carried an edge. Sir, with respect, those men in there, they're survivors, yes. Tough as nails. But they're also desperate. Cornered animals. What happens when they're not cornered anymore? When they have weapons and training and opportunity? They point those weapons where I tell them to. And if they decide to point them at our German assets instead, these aren't regular troops, General. They're NKVD-trained killers who've spent 3 years dreaming of revenge. Boyer lit another Chesterfield with shaking hands. Not fear. Frustration. Christ, can you imagine the security nightmare? Russian commandos and SS veterans in the same facility? The staff car slowed for a checkpoint. American MPs waved them through without inspection. Everyone recognized Patton's car. Beyond the checkpoint, the Bavarian countryside rolled past. Picture postcard perfect, except for the burned-out Panther tank rusting in a field. Alec. Patton finally took that drink. The bourbon burned clean. What do you know about Hannibal? Sir? Carthaginian general. Fought Rome. Took elephants over the Alps. Patton handed back the flask. His army was a mongrel outfit. Africans, Spaniards, Gauls, Greeks. Men who hated each other almost as much as they hated Rome. But Hannibal gave them a common enemy, a common purpose, and they nearly brought down the Republic. With respect, sir, Hannibal lost. Because he didn't press his advantage. Because he let politics back home undermine him. Patton pulled out a cigar, didn't light it, just rolled it between his fingers. I'm not making that mistake. The real enemy isn't in Berlin anymore, it's in Moscow. And who better to fight Russians than Russians who know their tricks? Boyer shuffled through more folders. We have other options. Polish free forces, Czech resistance fighters, Hungarians who all have the same problem. They know the Soviets are coming for their countries next. Patton bit the end off his cigar, spat it out the window. But they're patriots. They'll hesitate when the time comes. Wonder if they're betraying their homelands. The Russians in that warehouse, they've already made that choice. They're dead men walking. No country, no home, no loyalty except to whoever keeps them alive. The Mercedes climbed a hill. At the crest, they could see for miles. American supply convoys snaking along roads, displaced persons camps scattered like dice, the Alps rising blue and distant. Somewhere beyond those mountains, the Red Army was consolidating its grip on half of Europe. What about the others? Boyer persisted. The German scientists are one thing. We need their knowledge. But Waffen-SS? Sir, we're talking about war criminals, men who did things that the Russians also did, and that we did, when necessary. Patton's voice went cold. War's not a morality play, Alec. It's arithmetic. Our side plus their side equals victory. Everything else is philosophy. Boyer fell silent. The folders sat between them like accusations. Good American boys who'd fought clean wars, or as clean as wars got. Men who'd followed the rules mostly. Who'd make fine soldiers in a conventional conflict. Pull over, Patton ordered suddenly. The driver found a turnout overlooking a valley. Patton got out, Boyer following. The evening air was cool, sweet with wildflowers growing in old shell craters. Nature reclaiming war. See that? Patton pointed to a village below. White church steeple, red-roofed houses, smoke rising from chimneys. Looks peaceful, doesn't it? Eternal. The kind of place that's been here for centuries. Yes, sir. Last month, that village changed hands for the 5th time in 3 years. German, American, German again, American again. You know what the villagers did each time? Boyer shook his head. Changed the pictures on the wall. Hitler to Roosevelt, Roosevelt to Hitler. Back and forth. Patton lit his cigar, finally. They don't care who wins. They just want to survive. That's the lesson, Alec. Ideology is luxury. Survival is necessity. The Russians understand that. Exactly. Your clean-cut American boys? They're still fighting the last war. The good war. The one with clear sides and noble causes. Smoke wreathed Patton's head. The Russians know better. They know it's all shit. All survival. That makes them perfect for what's coming. A flight of P-51s passed overhead, heading east. Escort duty for bombers hitting what was left of German infrastructure. Or maybe reconnaissance flights, keeping an eye on Soviet positions. The line between ally and enemy was already blurring. Keep recruiting your Americans, Patton said finally. We'll need them too. Conventional forces for conventional fights. But the real war, the shadow war, that needs different soldiers. Men who've already been to hell. Who know the way back. They returned to the car. Boyer gathered his folders, careful not to crease the photographs of good soldiers who'd played by good rules. As he reached for the door handle, Patton stopped him. "You're missing the point, Alec." "Sir? You think I'm building a unit? Russians and Germans holding hands, singing Kumbaya?" Patton shook his head. "I don't give a damn if they work together. Hell, I don't care if they ever meet." Boyer's confusion showed. "Then what?" "Knowledge, Colonel. Battle-tested, blood-soaked knowledge." Patton tapped his temple with a thick finger. "Those Russians in there, they know how to survive 3 years in German camps, how to organize resistance under impossible conditions, how to hide weapons from guards who search you 5 times a day, how to make explosives from kitchen chemicals, skills you can't learn at West Point. We have training manuals, written by men who've never been hungry enough to eat leather, never been cold enough to burn their own shit for warmth." Patton's voice carried the weight of every battlefield he'd walked. "Every war, we lose irreplaceable knowledge. Veterans die, skills vanish, lessons learned in blood get forgotten by peacetime armies." Boyer began to understand. "You want to preserve it, document it. More than that, I want those Russians to train our instructors, who train the next generation, who train the generation after that." Patton gestured at the fading sunset. "Someday, maybe 5 years, maybe 50, some American boy is going to be trapped behind enemy lines, captured, tortured, and he'll survive because a dead Russian taught his instructor's instructor how to hide a razor blade in a boot heel. And the Germans? Same principle. Those SS mountain troops, they know how to fight in conditions that killed Napoleon's army, how to survive above the tree line, how to move artillery through passes everyone says are impassable." Patton's eyes were distant, seeing future wars. "Knowledge earned freezing their asses off on the Eastern Front. You want to throw that away because they wore the wrong uniform?" The church bells had stopped. Evening insects began their chorus. Somewhere, a dog barked, normal sound in an abnormal world. Think about it, Alec. The Japanese who survived Guadalcanal, they know jungle warfare like no American ever will. The Finns who held off the Red Army, they turned snow into a weapon. The British commandos, the French resistance, the Italian mountain troops, each one holds pieces of a puzzle we'll need someday. "A library," Boyer said slowly. "A living library of warfare." "That dies a little more each day." Patton climbed back into the Mercedes. "Right now, in hospitals across Europe, men are dying who know secrets worth divisions. How to navigate by stars when compasses fail, how to treat gangrene with moss, how to read micro-terrain for ambushes, dead and gone forever." Boyer followed him into the car, understanding dawning. "So it doesn't matter if they hate each other. Let them hate. Let them spit when they pass in hallways, as long as they talk to our stenographers first, as long as they demonstrate techniques to our cameras, as long as they pour their knowledge into American minds before they die." The driver started the engine. As they pulled away, Patton added, "The Russians know Soviet doctrine from the inside. The Germans know how to fight Russians. Put those pieces together, not in the same room, but in the same curriculum, and we'll have the most complete understanding of modern warfare ever assembled. Assuming they'll share honestly. Assuming they won't hold back or lie or... They're dead men, remember? Their knowledge is all they have left to trade, all that gives their survival meaning." Patton lit another cigar. "A man will sell his soul to know his expertise matters, that someone, somewhere, will remember what he learned dying in some frozen hellhole." Boyer was quiet for a long moment. Then, "How many are we talking about?" "Total." "Thousands, if we move fast. Every prisoner camp, every hospital, every DP center. Sort them by specialty. Debrief them systematically. Create the first comprehensive database of military knowledge in history. Congress will never fund it. Congress doesn't need to know. Black budget, off the books. Call it intelligence gathering if anyone asks." Smoke filled the car. 20 years from now, when we're fighting in some Asian jungle or Middle Eastern desert, you'll thank me. When some lieutenant survives because he learned a trick from a dead German's manual, you'll understand." The Mercedes wound through darkening countryside. Behind them, 43 ghosts were beginning their second lives. Ahead, thousands more waited, each one carrying secrets purchased with blood, ready to trade for a new name and a chance to matter. Hannibal would have understood, Boyer said finally. Patton smiled around his cigar. Number Hannibal lost because he couldn't preserve what he learned. His knowledge died with him on some beach in Bithynia. We're going to do better. We're going to make sure every hard lesson, every blood-bought skill, every terrible necessity survives. Forever, long enough, until the next poor bastards need it to stay alive. The headlights carved through gathering darkness. In the distance, more camps waited. More ghosts, more knowledge bleeding away with each dawn. But not if Patton could help it. Not this time. 43 Russians, Boyer said quietly. Living ghosts with nothing to lose. Exactly what we need. Patton flicked his cigar into the road. Because the enemy we're facing has no rules, no conscience, no limits. To beat them, we need men who've already lost everything. Men who can't be broken because they're already in pieces. The Mercedes pulled back onto the road. In the side mirror, Patton watched the camp recede. Somewhere in that maze of warehouses and barbed wire, 43 dead men were being reborn with American names and American papers. Tomorrow, they'd start training other dead men, Germans, Poles, Czechs, anyone willing to fight the future Patton saw coming. Boyer was right about one thing. It would be a security nightmare. Russians and Germans under the same roof. Knives would come out. Blood would spill. Some would die before they ever faced the real enemy. But the survivors would be harder than steel. Forged in hatred. Tempered by necessity. Patton smiled. Hannibal would have understood. July 18th, 1945. 2147 local time. Isola di San Pietro, Tyrrhenian Sea. The storm came from nowhere. 1 minute, gunner's mate first class, Hector X. Delgado, Shipwreck, to everyone who'd served with him for more than 5 minutes, had clear skies and calm seas. The next, his PT-109 was climbing walls of black water that shouldn't exist in July. All ahead, slow! Lieutenant Commander Bennett gripped the helm, knuckles white against polished brass. The boat's triple Packard engines screamed like banshees, props cavitating in the chaotic water. Shipwreck, check the tie-downs. And don't tell me you've seen worse. Shipwreck grabbed a lifeline, the salt-crusted rope burning his palms, and worked aft with the rolling gait of a man who'd grown up on San Diego's docks. 6 months of frogman training at Fort Pierce had just made him cockier about his sea legs. Water crashed over the bow, cold as a witch's kiss, soaking through his peacoat. The experimental gear, early scuba rigs that looked like something Jules Verne dreamed up, limpet mines packed in waterproof cases, underwater demolition packs that sweated nitroglycerin in the heat, strained against their tie-downs with each roll. Tied down tighter than a preacher's wallet on Sunday, Skipper. Lightning turned the sea white-purple, the flash burning after images. In that instant, Shipwreck saw the island, black volcanic rock jutting from foam like bad teeth, way closer than any island should be. Though I remember this one time off Gibraltar when... Hard to starboard! Bennett spun the wheel, veins standing out on his forearms. Too late. The PT boat scraped over submerged rocks with a sound like God's own fingernails on a chalkboard. Props churned foam thick as meringue. They limped into a natural harbor, the boat listing slightly to port. A fishing village hugged the shore. Stone houses that looked older than America, nets drying on wooden racks despite the storm, a small church perched on the hill like a guardian. Damage report, Bennett called, rain streaming off his cap. Port engines shot to hell! Chief Petty Officer Nowak emerged from below, coveralls black with oil and bilge water. Chicago Polish, built like a beer barrel, mustache drooping with moisture. Starboard's running rougher than my ex-wife's tongue. We need repairs or we're swimming home. Shipwreck. Take Hoffman and Fitzgerald. Find the mayor or whoever runs this rock. Bennett studied the village through binoculars. No lights, not even candles in windows. Something's wrong here. Whole place feels like a funeral. Shipwreck checked his Colt 45, working the slide to ensure no salt had fouled it. The pistol was non-regulation, a gift from a Marine colonel after a bar fight in Gibraltar where Shipwreck had taken on 6 British commandos and walked away grinning. Could be they just got good sense, Skip. Storm like this, I'd be hiding under my bunk. Reminds me of this squall off the Azores. Can it, Delgado? Just find someone who can help. Hoffman, radio man turned commando, face scarred from a Stuka's strafing run, checked his Thompson, ejecting the magazine and slapping it back home. Fitzgerald, Boston Irish with hands like sledgehammers and a face only a mother could love, cracked knuckles that sounded like snapping lumber. They splashed through surf that grabbed at their legs like cold hands. The beach was crushed volcanic sand, black as printer's ink, crunching under their boondockers. The village was tomb quiet, just wind screaming between buildings and rain hammering tile roofs. "Where the hell is everybody?" Fitzgerald muttered, water streaming from his watch cap. "Even the rats cleared out." Shipwreck's flashlight, Navy issue, heavy as a club, cut through the darkness. The beam found the first door, oak planks thick as his wrist, smashed inward like tissue paper, claw marks in the wood. Deep gouges, 4 parallel tracks too wide for any animal. The wood around them was stained dark, and it wasn't from rain. "Stay sharp, boys. This ain't no shore leave." For once, Shipwreck didn't have a story. The gouges reminded him of something, but the memory skittered away like a crab. They pushed into the village, cobblestones slick with rain and something else, something that made their boots stick slightly with each step. More broken doors, windows shattered outward, glass sparkling in the flashlight beams like deadly snow. Dark stains on walls that the rain couldn't wash away. The copperpenny smell of blood mixed with something else, brine and rot and deep ocean. Then they heard it, singing, Latin hymns drifting on the wind, coming from the church. But underneath the familiar words, other sounds, harmonics that human throats shouldn't make. They climbed the hill, legs burning from the grade. The church loomed above them, stone walls dark with moisture, bell tower reaching toward storm clouds like a finger. The church door, massive thing that looked like it could stop a tank, hung by one bronze hinge. The bronze was green with verdigris, except where recent gouges showed bright metal. Inside, maybe 30 villagers huddled in pews, worn smooth by centuries of worship. Men in rough fishing clothes, women clutching children who stared with eyes too old for their faces, all of them soaking wet. It pooled beneath the pews, ran in rivulets toward the altar. The smell of deep ocean filled the space. The hymn continued, voices blending in harmonics that resonated in Shipwreck's chest. An old priest stood at the altar, leading them. His cassock was drenched, heavy with water, dripping steadily. Behind him, stained glass windows showed scenes that made Shipwreck's skin crawl. Not Christ on the cross, something else. A figure with too many limbs, crowned with coral, arms spread in benediction over waves full of kneeling figures. Angels descending not from heaven but from surface waters into depths, saints offering themselves to things with tentacles and scales. Americani? The priest's English was accented but clear, Mediterranean vowels softened by years. Water dripped from his chin as he spoke. "You must leave, before they return." "Before who returns, Padre?" Shipwreck kept his hand on his pistol. The holster leather was wet, squeaking slightly. "And while we're at it, what happened to your door?" "Looks like someone took a can opener to it." "I profondi, the deep ones." The priest crossed himself with a hand that trembled from more than age. His cassock was torn at the shoulder, 3 parallel rips. "They come with storms. Take people to the water. Tonight they came early. Took 7 before we reached sanctuary. The Benedetti family. Little Maria, only 6 years old." Fitzgerald snorted, spraying water from his mustache. "Fish stories, Padre?" "Listen, I grew up in Southie. Only things coming from the water are drunks and—" A scream from the harbor cut him off. Not human. Not animal. Something between. Around. Beyond. The sound of it made Shipwreck's teeth ache. Then the night exploded. The PT's twin 50 calibers opened up, the sound like ripping canvas amplified by thunder. Tracers carved red lines through rain, beautiful and terrible. Shipwreck ran to a window, ancient glass warped with age. In the lightning flashes, he saw them. They moved wrong. Joints bending in too many places, like someone had added extra hinges. 7, maybe 8 feet tall, limbs too long for even those frames. Scaled skin glistened like oil on water. The 50s caught 3 mid-stride, heavy rounds designed to punch through aircraft aluminum, punching fist-sized holes through flesh, spinning bodies into cartwheels. Black ichor sprayed in fans, too dark for blood. But more kept coming. Dozens boiling from the waves like a pot overflowing. Mother of God and all his hairy apostles. Fitzgerald went white as his Irish skin allowed. The 50s never stopped. Nowak had trained his gunners well. Shipwreck could picture the chief standing behind them, bellowing corrections. Disciplined bursts, walking fire across the beach in textbook patterns. Deep ones jerked and danced as rounds tore through them. One's arm came off at the elbow, the limb spinning away. Another folded in half as bullets severed its spine, top half crawling forward even as black fluid poured from its middle. The water turned black with their blood, foam-crested waves carrying the stain out to sea. But they kept coming, walking through the fire like it was rain. "We gotta get back." Shipwreck headed for the door. "Our boys are dying down there." "You cannot." The priest grabbed his arm with surprising strength, fingers like iron bands. "To leave sanctuary is death. The old agreements, stone and faith protect. Outside ... He shook his head. Shipwreck shook him off, adrenaline making him rougher than intended. The priest stumbled back. "Listen, Padre, I appreciate the concern, but those are my shipmates down there. And I've faced worse than fishmen. This one time off the Azores. No, forget it. Boys on me." They charged down the hill, Thompson and pistols against nightmares. The 50s muzzle flashes lit their way, strobing images that would live in their dreams. Deep ones swarming over rocks slick with their own dead, bodies piling up like cordwood. The gunner, Shipwreck, could see him now, Seaman Briggs from Ohio, just turned 19, traversing mechanically, never letting up even as his hands must be burning from the vibration. 30 yards from the boat. A deep one rose from behind a fishing shack, nets draped over its form like a mockery of human clothes. Fitzgerald put 6.45 rounds center mass, the heavy slugs hitting like hammers. It staggered but didn't drop. Claws raked across his chest, shredding pea coat and flesh in 4 parallel lines. He screamed, more anger than pain, and hit it with a left hook that would have dropped a heavyweight. His fist sank into its face with a wet sound. He pulled back, hand covered in slime that glowed faintly phosphorescent. Shipwreck put his last 2 rounds through its eye, eyes like a grouper's, flat and dead. It went down hard, twitching. "Hoffman! Cover Fitz!" 25 yards. 3 more deep ones emerged from an alley between houses. These carried weapons, tridents of fused bone and metal, barnacle-crusted and dripping. Hoffman's Thompson chattered, walking rounds across them. One went down. The other 2 kept coming, moving in that sideways scuttle that hurt to watch. Shipwreck snatched up a boathook from a rack, good hardwood with a steel point. Spun it like his grandfather had taught him with the staff. Caught the first creature in what might have been its knee. The joint bent backward with a crack like breaking shellfish. It went down shrieking. The second swung its club. Shipwreck ducked, felt the wind of it pass. The weapon hit the stone wall behind him, exploding masonry. He drove the boathook up under its jaw, through the soft pallet. Black ichor fountained. It dropped, taking his weapon with it. 20 yards. But now they were coming from the water in waves. Dozens. Scores. The 50s swept back and forth, Briggs working them like a maestro. Tracers carved through scaled bodies. But for every one that fell, 2 more emerged from the foam. "Move! Move! Move!" 15 yards. A massive deep one burst from a house to their right. It had been inside. Waiting. It caught Hoffman across the shoulder, claws raking through cloth and flesh. The radio man spun away, keeping his feet but losing his Thompson. It skittered across wet cobblestones. Fitzgerald grabbed the thing in a bear hug before it could finish Hoffman. His wounded chest leaked red through shredded clothes, but he didn't let go. "Get him up! I got this bastard!" The Deep One's claws raked Fitzgerald's back. He bellowed like a bull, muscles standing out like bridge cables. Lifted the creature, had to weigh 300 pounds, and drove it headfirst into the cobblestones. The crack echoed off buildings. It stopped moving. 10 yards. The 50s churned the water to foam thick as beer head. Spent brass rained from the gun tubs, hitting the deck with a sound like metal rain. But Briggs was slowing. Heat shimmer rose from the barrels like a desert mirage. The metal was starting to glow cherry red. A massive Deep One emerged from the surf, different from the others. Bone crown on its head that might have been coral, might have been skull. Trident of fused metal and organic matter, barnacles growing on its length. The others moved around it like schools of fish avoiding a shark. Leader, chief, king, whatever nightmares called their bosses. It pointed at the PT boat. The swarm surged forward with new purpose. "Briggs, the big one! Light that ugly bastard up!" The 50s swung, barrels glowing. Tracers walked up the leader's body. Scales sparked and shattered. Black blood sprayed in pressurized jets. But it kept coming. The rounds that would cut a man in half, turn a tree to splinters, just staggered it. 5 yards from the boat. Deep Ones climbing over their own dead. Hoffman was on his feet, blood soaking his left shoulder, firing a pistol with his good arm. Fitzgerald could barely stand. They were out of ammo, out of options. Shipwreck made his choice. The kind of stupid glory hound choice his instructors always said would get him killed. Dropped his empty pistol in the sand. Pulled his K-bar. Good Navy steel. Blade kept sharp enough to shave with. "Shipwreck, you crazy bastard, no!" Hoffman screamed. But Shipwreck was already moving, sprinting straight at the leader with that rolling gait that had carried him through 100 bar fights from Dago to Norfolk. His grandfather had been a wrestler in Tijuana. Some of that old knowledge lived in his bones. The thing saw him coming, swung the trident in a whistling arc. Shipwreck rolled under. Years of dodging shore patrol teaching flexibility came up inside its reach. The knife went in below what might have been ribs, assuming these things had ribs. The blade scraped against something hard, bone or cartilage, before sinking deep. He twisted like they'd taught in frogman school. Black ichor gushed over his hands, cold as Arctic water, burning like acid. The thing screamed. Sound like a ship's hull tearing on rocks. Claws raked Shipwreck's back, shredding his pea-coat, finding flesh. He held on like a bulldog, stabbing again. Again. Working the blade like his instructor Chief Ramirez had beaten into him, destroy the organs, make it bleed. "It's just meat," Ramirez used to say. "Everything's just meat." The trident came around. Shipwreck caught the haft, kelp-wrapped metal slick with slime, redirected it past his head. The tines sparked on stone, leaving gouges. He drove the K-bar up, under what served as a chin, felt it punch through into something vital. Hot fluid poured over his hands. The leader swayed, dropped the trident with a clang. Those huge eyes, no pupils, just black orbs, fixed on Shipwreck with something like surprise. Or maybe respect. It fell backward into the surf with a splash that sent spray 20 feet. Silence. Even the storm seemed to pause. The other Deep Ones stopped mid-stride, turned as one to look at their fallen leader. The 50s had gone quiet, barrels glowing cherry red, finally overheated. Smoke rose from the guns like incense. Shipwreck stood there, knife dripping, blood running from a dozen cuts. His pea-coat hung in tatters. One eye was already swelling shut, but he was grinning that Shipwreck grin that had gotten him busted down from petty officer twice. "That's right, you ugly fish-faced bastards. Hector X. Delgado. Remember the name? Tell your fishwives. Tell your fish kids. Shipwreck sent your boss to Davy Jones." The Deep Ones retreated. Not routed, organized. They took their leader's body, 6 of them lifting the massive form. Dragged it into the waves with the reverence of pallbearers. Within seconds, the beach was empty except for the dead. Black stains on black sand, the smell of copper and brine. "Shipwreck!" Bennett was at the rail. "Get your ass aboard before I leave you for the locals." They stumbled to the boat. Briggs was slumped over the 50, hands burned from the overheated gun, blisters already forming. But alive. They all were, somehow. Even Fitzgerald, though his chest looked like he'd wrestled a tiger. "Damage?" Shipwreck gasped. His ribs felt like someone had worked them over with a ball-peen hammer. "Hull's scratched to shit. Props are bent like pretzels, but she'll float." Bennett studied the empty beach. What the hell were those things? Shipwreck looked at his knife. The blade was pitted, corroded from the ichor like he'd dipped it in acid. "Does it matter, Skip?" "They're gone. Probably swimming back to tell Neptune that Shipwreck's not to be messed with." As Nowak worked to get the engines running, a figure emerged from the village shadows. The priest, still dripping seawater, walked down to the beach alone. He stopped at the water line, far enough that the crew's weapons tracked him but close enough to be heard. "You killed their principe," he called out, voice carrying over the dying storm. "Their prince. They will not return this season. You have freed us from our obligation." He pulled something from his cassock, held it up. Even in the darkness it gleamed. "For the one who stood against I Profondi." The priest set the object on a flat rock and retreated back up the beach. Only when he disappeared into the shadows did Shipwreck wade ashore to retrieve it. An ancient coin, bronze worn smooth by centuries of handling. One side showed a face that might have been Neptune, the other, something else. Something with too many tentacles. "Yeah, well, just make sure they spell my name right in your prayers, Padre," Shipwreck called to the darkness. But he pocketed the coin carefully. Dawn found them limping north on one engine, prop shaft vibrating bad enough to rattle teeth. The storm had passed like a bad dream. Sky clear as a baby's conscience. Bennett decided to check their position, chart the damage properly. "Shipwreck, where the hell's that village?" Shipwreck looked back. The island sat empty in morning light. No houses, no church on the hill, no harbor where they'd sheltered. Just bare volcanic rock and scrub grass tough as wire. That's impossible." Fitzgerald leaned on the rail, bandaged chest forgotten. "We were just there. The priest. The people." They stared at the empty rock. Morning sun made it look almost peaceful. No sign they'd ever been there, no proof except their wounds, the twisted props, and the deep gouges in the hull. Shipwreck felt the coin in his pocket. Ancient bronze, worn smooth, real, solid. The only evidence that any of it had happened. "What do we tell them, Skip?" Briggs asked, hands wrapped in gauze like a prize fighter. Bennett was quiet for a long moment. The only sounds were the engine's unhealthy rattle and waves against the hull. "Storm damage. Ran aground in the night. Hostile wildlife. Maybe sharks. Maybe barracuda. Keep it simple. Keep it believable." "But the village—" "What village, Hoffman?" Bennett's voice was flat as a grave marker. "You see any village?" They all looked at the empty island, at the morning sea, calm as a mill pond, at each other, at the blood still drying on the deck. "No, sir," they said in unison. The Mediterranean kept its secrets deeper than any frogman could dive. 1 month after San Pietro, Shipwreck was keeping those secrets in a nameless bar in Naples. August heat made the place stifling, but the wine was cold and the audience was fresh. 2 supply clerks and a motor pool sergeant who hadn't heard his stories yet. So there I was, knife in hand, facing down this Nazi frogman twice my size. He gestured wildly, sloshing wine. Must have been one of those experimental super soldiers you hear about. Arms like tree trunks, eyes glowing red in the dark. Delgado. The voice cut through his story like a bosun's whistle. Shipwreck turned to find Captain Bennett standing behind him. Dress whites immaculate despite the heat. Stone-cold sober. Never a good sign. "Captain!" Shipwreck tried to stand, managed it on the second attempt. "Buy you a drink?" "I was just telling the boys about that time off Sardinia when—" "Outside. Now." The supply clerks scattered. Shipwreck grabbed his wine bottle, waste not, want not, and followed Bennett into the alley. The air was thick with garlic and diesel fumes from the harbor. "You're being transferred," Bennett said without preamble, effective immediately. "Transferred? Cap, if this is about that thing with the Admiral's daughter—" "It's not. Bennett pulled out orders, handed them over. Some Army unit in Germany wants you as a cross-service liaison, technical advisor on naval special operations. Shipwreck squinted at the papers, trying to focus through the wine. Bavaria. What the hell's in Bavaria? War's over, Captain. We won, remember? Apparently someone thinks you have skills they need. Bennett's expression said he couldn't imagine what those might be. You report to Lieutenant Colonel Boyer, 3rd Army Intelligence, in 48 hours. Boyer? The name meant nothing. Never heard of him. Neither have I, but the orders came from high up. Very high. Bennett paused. This wouldn't have anything to do with that incident off San Pietro, would it? The one where you claimed storm damage? Shipwreck kept his face innocent. Storm damage. Hostile wildlife. Just like the report said, Cappy. Right. Bennett clearly didn't believe a word. Just like that giant squid off Malta, and the Nazi weather experiment near Corsica. Funny how trouble finds you in the strangest places. Those were all legitimate. Save it, Delgado. Maybe the Army will buy your bullshit. God knows the Navy's had enough. But there was something almost like fondness in his voice. Try not to start any wars with the Russians. Would I do that? Bennett just stared at him. Okay, fair point. Shipwreck took a swig from his bottle. But Bavaria? What am I supposed to do with a bunch of Army dog faces? Teach them to tie knots? That's between you and this Boyer character. Bennett turned to go, then paused. Word of advice, Shipwreck. Whatever you saw out there, whatever really happened, maybe keep it to yourself. Some stories are better left untold. He disappeared into the Naples night, leaving Shipwreck alone with his wine and his orders. Bavaria. Army Intelligence. Lieutenant Colonel Boyer. Shipwreck felt the weight of the coin in his pocket, the one from San Pietro, the one that seemed to grow heavier when storms approached, the one with Neptune on one side and something else, something with too many angles on the other. Maybe it was time for a change. The Mediterranean was getting too small anyway. Too many places where fishermen crossed themselves when they saw him. Too many harbors where old women muttered prayers and made signs against evil. Too many islands that shouldn't exist, with villages that weren't there in the morning. Besides, what could possibly be in landlocked Bavaria that was worse than what lurked beneath the waves? He'd find out in 48 hours. Shipwreck headed back into the bar. If he was going to be surrounded by Army types, he'd need all the liquid courage he could get. And maybe, just maybe, he'd finish that story about the Nazi frogman. The one that was almost true. The one that was so much easier to tell than the truth about princes with bone crowns and priests who dripped seawater. Shipwreck raised his bottle in a mock toast to the empty alley, to new beginnings, to landlocked Bavaria, to whatever Lieutenant Colonel Boyer wanted with a sailor who killed princes. The Mediterranean could keep its secrets. He was about to learn what secrets the mountains held. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. I'm Thomas Richter, and it's been an honor to share this story with you. If you're ready for your next mission, we've got a full arsenal of series waiting for you on this platform. Each one is locked and loaded with the kind of stories that keep you pressing forward no matter what. For those who march to the beat of our soundtrack, all of our music is deployed across every major streaming platform. Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, you name it. Just search for Springfield Syndrome or the audiobook title to add it to your playlist. Your support keeps us in the fight, and we'd be grateful if you'd drop us a review wherever you grab this audiobook. Your feedback is our intel. It helps us improve our operations and helps other listeners find their next objective. Stay strong, stay sharp, and remember, the only easy day was yesterday. This is Thomas Richter, signing off.